Attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, welcome to the webinar about the Ombuds Program for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. My name is Suzanne DeBeaumont. I work for NYAIL at the MFP Transition Center. And just a little bit of housekeeping first. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them using the questions box on your Citrix screen. You should have a little box that says questions, and that allows you to ask a question, and I'll read out any questions that are being asked. And also, there is a chat feature that you can use. I don't have the attendees open, so I won't see if you raise your hand, so please don't use the raised hand feature. All the people who are on the call right now can only hear. You won't be able to speak a question, but if you do have a question that you would rather speak out loud, let me know, and I am able to unmute any person. So you would just, in the question format, say, I'd like to ask a question out loud, and then I will unmute you so that you can ask your question. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the people we have here with us today. We have with us Rosemary who is the director, Rosemary Lamb, who is the director of the Division of Advocacy and Outreach for the Justice Center. We also have Carrie S. I'm not even going to try and pronounce her last name. She's going to have to say it herself. And she is with the Ombudsperson Program for the Capital District. And we also have a special guest, Crystal Collins, who some of you probably recognize as a former MFP regional lead, and she'll just be joining us today. So without further ado, I'm going to turn this over to Rosemary, and we'll start off the program on the Ombudsperson Program.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. Suzanne came and spoke with our ombudspersons when we had our regional meeting last month, and at that time we discussed that it would be helpful for you all to learn more about the program that we have through the New York State Justice Center. This is an organizational chart that I understand that it's probably pretty tiny for you all to see. Our executive director is Jeff Wise. Some of you may know him coming from the State Rehabilitation Association, and our executive deputy director is Jay Kianaga, who some of you may know from previously working with the Office for Persons with Developmental Disabilities. Following on down, you can maybe see that we are in the Office of Program and Policy. And within the Office of Program and Policies, the Division of Training, Division of Advocacy, which is us, and Policy and Adult Home Advocacy. We've got a line that's a little amiss here. The Division of Reporting and Analytics is actually in the Office of Administration. And within the Division of Advocacy, in addition to the Ombudsperson Program for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities, we have Surrogate Decision-Making Committee Program, technology-related assistance for individuals with disabilities or trade, and programs and grants, information and referral, Interagency Council for persons who are deaf, blind, or hard of hearing, which has not been very active. We're hopeful to get that initiative moving again. And then we're also engaged in short-term case and systems advocacy and interagency collaborations. We're going to talk a little bit more about that later on. We're going to stay focused on the Ombudsperson's Program right now. Within the Ombudsperson Program, we have myself as the director, Tom Fisher, who is our director of the Surrogate Decision-Making Program, but he also assists me in providing support and supervision to our ombudspersons. Jim Boucher, Carrie Sonthivongnorath, who is here with me today, and any of you who can spell her name correctly and say it correctly at the end of the seminar get some gigantic chocolate bar or some treat of your choice. Carrie Mahoney, Raquel Hendricks and Taisha Nicole Grant. And the next slide, you'll see that Jim is at the Sunmount DDSO up in the North Country. His phone number and email are listed. Oops, sorry, Jim, we didn't capitalize your last name there. Carrie Sonthivongnorath, Capital Region. Carrie Mahoney, who's in the Taconic region. Raquel Hendricks, who's at Bernard Feinson in Queens. And Taisha Nicole Grant, or Taisha, as we call her, in Brooklyn. You all who work with OPWDD, Office of Persons with Developmental Disabilities, are probably familiar with their state operations regions. And then the next slide is for their regional offices. Carrie pointed out that we need to update these slides because there's a little bit of a difference with the names on who the directors are, but the configuration remains the same. And those catchment areas are obviously pretty large, whether it's for state operated or for the regional offices, number of counties covered. That's why we had to narrow the focus for the ombudspersons because of the size of the regions. So they proactively focus on the needs of people who are living on campus or for those who've moved out into the community within the past year to year and a half. That is not set in stone, obviously, that in some circumstances they've been working with people who've lived in the community most of their lives, that they never even lived on campus.
And so when you say on campus, you mean developmental center?
The developmental center. Thank you for clarifying that, Suzanne. I know it sounds like it's the state university, but that's a term that is used by the developmental centers to refer to people that are living at the developmental center or on the grounds of the developmental center, maybe in some type of group home. Reactively, we will, or the ombuds people will address the needs of other individuals that's brought to their attention or assigned by me. And a case in point may be those of you who are from Central New York. We don't have an ombudsperson designated to serve in that area, although you'll see, if you look back on the catchment areas, technically that's part of the Sunmount region. So depending on the circumstance that may be brought to my attention, I may ask Jim Boucher to look into the situation, or something may be brought to his attention and he may touch base with me about that. So if you have a circumstance with a constituent that you're working with and we don't have an ombudsperson in that area, I would encourage you to contact me or the person that's our ombudsperson that's closest to that region, and see if there's something that we might be able to do to provide assistance. A little bit of the program history. The Ombudsperson Program, it was called Ombudsmen at that time, and it was in the Office for Persons with Developmental Disabilities. As of 1987, it was created. And then in 2001, the law was amended to transfer the Ombudsperson Program to our previous agency. 2001, we've got it as, I'm sorry, Carrie's correcting me here, that in 2011, the program was came into CQC APD, and that was upon recommendation of Clarence Sundrum. You may remember that Mr. Sundrum had done a paper on behalf of the governor's office where he was looking at services for people with disabilities, and there was some concern that having the Ombudsperson Program housed in the Office of Persons with Developmental Disabilities could compromise their independence, and because it would be difficult to be advocating in an environment where you also had to report to the director of the DDSO as your supervisor. So that was the reason for the transfer. And then with the creation of the Justice Center in 2013 through the Justice Center for Protection of People with Special Needs Act, those responsibilities came over to the Justice Center along with most of CQC APD's advocacy services. And the responsibilities of an ombudsperson are to advocate for individuals with developmental or intellectual disabilities who may be living on a developmental center, transitioning out, or individuals that have been in the community, to promote self-determination and self-advocacy activities, to advise and consult not only with the individuals with disabilities, but also with families, guardians, and staff of the developmental center or community agencies. They review and attempt to remedy specific complaints that the constituents may have, and if it's inappropriate, to make a referral with regards to that complaint to another source, they will do that. And I think a couple of things that are really critical to know about the work that our ombuds, and I know we abbreviate ombudsperson to say ombuds, and somebody pointed out to me one time that it sounds like we're saying bugs, and I promise you we are not saying that. We are just abbreviating the term. They keep complaints confidential, records are confidential, and that means that anyone who talks to an ombudsperson is engaged in a confidential conversation. So I think that's something that's helpful not only for constituents and family members or guardians to know, but also for staff people to know. There are times that staff people may come to one of our ombuds with a particular issue, and the ombuds may be able to talk it through with them and help them come up with a strategy. And Carrie's going to talk about that a little more. One of their responsibilities is also advising and consulting with the boards of visitors. And different parts of the state have different configuration of boards of visitors. In a few circumstances, the boards are very active, very actively engaged in visiting programs, residences, and other services that serve people with developmental and intellectual disabilities. In other circumstances, they are not as active. And I know there's been some concern voiced about the appointments process, that many of the boards of visitors are down on members because members have not been appointed. But the Office of Persons with Developmental Disabilities does not do the appointing. The appointing comes from the governor's office. Our ombuds people also meet regularly with the DDSOO or their community counterpart, staff or director. We're fortunate that our ombuds people have very good relationships with the administration in the different areas of the state, and are able to get pretty ready access, not only on an ongoing basis, but even in emergency circumstances. And then we also meet with the commissioner of OPWDD or their representative at least once a year. We've been meeting more frequently this year, and we'll try to deal with more systemic issues in those kinds of meetings. And I'm going to turn things over now to Carrie Sonthivongnorath. She's going to talk with you more about some of the specific committee work that they do.
Yeah, I'll kind of give a little bit of a brief overview of each committee to help people who may not have a total understanding of some of the other things that we do. Our behavior review committee basically consists of reviewing any behavior plans that any of the individuals would have, as well as the psychotropic medications that they are on. So we, at Capitol, we have a community pharmacist, I would say, is probably, I don't know his exact title, but he participates in the committee as well as a psychologist. Different BDSOs also may have a nurse on the committee, so you're looking for someone who has some background on medical information to kind of at least help with the information on the medication, so that's also helpful. We also have our incident review committee, which we review any incident reports that have been filed through to the DDSO, not Justice Center investigations. These are ones that are specific to the DDSO. We also have self-advocacy committee, so that may consist of any of the individuals out, whether they're in the community or on a campus or developmental center, as well as staff. You may also have some family members that participate, and in the different areas in the state, some of the ombudsmen also do participate in that as well. We have our risk management committee, which those are basically more intense behavior plans. We may have individuals that are at Sunmount that have more intense restrictions placed on them, either maybe from coming from jail or being on probation. And we look at those restrictions, and then they also need to be reviewed by central office for their approval. So that would be OPWDD central office. Then we also attend any of the consumers' quarterly or annual reviews that are held, basically kind of going over their progress. If there's any issues that the individuals may have that they want to have brought up at those meetings, sometimes they request us to come and attend, and sometimes there may be something that they want to bring up, or they may just be proud of the progress that they've made over the year and want us to be there to participate. And lastly, we have our placement committee meeting, which if there's an individual that's possibly living at home and the family is advocating for some support that they need them to be placed, that may be a time when that's discussed. Also, if we have individuals that are living in an IRA and they may need to move based on a medical need or just changes that they've had or just a request for a different home, that would be an opportunity for that to be discussed then. A couple of things that we are not responsible for is being involved with any investigations. So even though we are able to review the ones that are filed at the DDSO, we have nothing to do with how things are investigated. We also don't have access to specific information from investigations, so all we do is see the end result of an investigation, but nothing more than that. We also don't have any access to the, instead of, it says VPCR, but more specifically, people may know it as the hotline number that people call to report an incident report to the Justice Center, so we don't have any access to any of that. And we are also not mandated reporters, so which Rosemary had touched on a little bit earlier. If people do have conversations with us, it is kept confidential, and so sometimes that makes people feel a little bit better.
But if somebody said to you, "This is happening, and I want help with it," you could report it if that's what the person's asking you to do.
Well,
what we would do in that particular circumstance, this is Rosemary, what we would do in that particular situation is we would work with that particular individual so they would understand if they're a mandated reporter, talking to the ombudsperson does not relieve them of their responsibilities to report.
Oh, no, I meant if you're talking with a person
individual
who's receiving services,
I'm sorry.
and that person receiving services says to you, "My staff member has been hitting me."
We would work out ways to have that particular situation be reported, and would talk with that individual about ways that could happen. That could happen through the person reporting anonymously if they felt that they needed to do that, or by talking with us, we would say, this is very serious. This needs to get reported. Let's work out a way so that we can do that. We would help.
Yes. Yeah.
It will get reported.
Yeah.
Sorry, I misunderstood you.
Yeah. Because I'm thinking, what do you mean if they say that?
Okay, so this, how we can help is basically to work with other units within the Justice Center. So if there's something that's brought to our attention and it may not be something specific to what we do, we can kind of be a point of contact to help work things out, either with people that we know at the Justice Center or other agencies. So kind of a go-to person to, like you said earlier, you know, we're here to help. We're not going to say we're not going to help anybody. So, and encourage contacting an ombudsperson. So if people have a question about something and they're not sure, I always tell people to call me, even if it's something you're not sure that I would be involved with or any of our counterparts, you know, would be able to assist with. You can always give us a call and we would at least help get you in the right direction or give you somebody else that you can contact. And lastly is to support implementation of best practices and assist with remediation. So a couple other agencies or people that we may also be working with would be the Mental Hygiene Legal Services, also known as MHLS, Self-Advocacy Association of New York State, community-based service providers, independent living centers, community advocacy groups, and I'm just going to say the trade program rather than to read all that out. And I'm kind of going to go off. You can see the 3 bullets in front of you, but to go over kind of some of the common systemic issues that I know we as a group have brought up recently is just kind of as the state or OPWDD is going through changes, we're seeing things kind of work well and not work well in different areas. So I know our developmental center closed at the end of March, Capital District or ODHEC Developmental Center. For us, overall, the transition plans went well, but there were a couple that, you know, in the planning process, it sounded like it was going to work well. And then once individuals moved out into the community, things didn't go as well. And so the DDSO overall was great. They helped the private agencies or other agencies and, you know, to help that transition work out better for the individual. So there was a little bump maybe for some of those individuals. And also we have individuals that may have more serious behavior incidents in the community. Maybe they're coming from Sunmount, which is a locked facility, and individuals may not go out into the community as much as they're used to when they're in an IRA Capital District because they have less restrictions, or they're, you know, closer to a city versus being up in the country. So you may see some more behavior challenges with that as individuals move out. And then the last one, with the loss of appropriate day services and employment, with the workshops not being as readily available, individuals have had to kind of go through an adjustment period with finding different ways of, you know, making a paycheck, as they would say, and a little bit of frustration with not being able to make money as much. So that's certainly been an issue that we've seen come up across the board as well. Okay. If there's any MSCs out there, I apologize for this one, but just as it's changed, you know, we used to have state MSCs as well as private agency MSCs, and it's kind of been a little bit of transition, I think, for everybody, a learning process on you know, how things are and sharing information and making sure the communication is kept open. I think that has been something that we've kind of seen again across the state, making sure information is passed along to everyone. The other one is the status of people that are on a 730 court-ordered status, and again, I keep referencing Sunmount, but some of these things are more specific to up there. You have individuals that are coming from jail and they're on a different status, and so that may impact the way that they are able to go out into the community. They may not be able to. They may have to stay there on campus. So that kind of, again, precludes the flexibility of where they can and cannot go. And then the last one would be lack of placement guidelines. Okay, and here's a blank case example. So I, off the top of my head, I can at least come up with, I'll try to come up with one, a more simple one maybe, and then.
Well, maybe I could say
Oh,
one
sure, go ahead.
that we just had
Okay.
from one of the ombudspersons contacted us because there was an individual in a nursing home who's 25 years old, and the aunt is sort of the primary contact for her, but this individual was very interested in being in the community more, but at that point was not interested in leaving the nursing home. So, you know, what we're trying to do is connect both her and the aunt up with a peer. The aunt's concern is that this young woman uses a vent, and the aunt felt like she would not be safe if she was in an IRA in the community, that she was safe in the nursing home. So just having somebody who uses a vent go visit with her, someone who's employed, lives in the community, you know, so just, you know, having somebody who's kind of already doing that might be, you know, be able to answer some real life questions about how does that exactly work, and can it work. So that's a
great
recent example.
Yes. Right. And just another, to kind of go along with that, when the developmental center was closing, you have had individuals who lived there for 20 years or 25 years, you know, and the families are nervous, or the individuals themselves are nervous because this is the world that they've known for that long. And oh my God, what's going to happen when we move out into the community? Mm-hmm. So again, you would have maybe parents or other individuals that are out in the community and have had that experience. So again, to share and help people transition, I think that was definitely an issue that has happened and is going to continue to happen as the developmental centers do close. So,
yeah, any other ones? One that is very much present for, I think, all of the regions of the state, and we're working with folks from OPWDD on this one, that people who live near borders with other states, and there's been an interpretation of guidance from the Division of the Budget and the Governor's Office that out-of-state travel is precluded, and that's posed some serious challenges to people who live very close to Connecticut or Vermont, the folks in the Southern Tier area for
Pennsylvania.
The Pennsylvania, yeah, and even Ohio in some circumstances. That constituents have had travel plans to go do something that has, you know, it's important to them that if your team that you support is the Buffalo Bills, suggesting, or the team that you support is the Giants, bear with me, sports fans, you can tell that I don't follow football, and you're told instead, well, you need to go see a Bills game because that's in New York, that might be pretty frustrating for you because that's not the team that you support. Or if there's a particular
You want to go to Disney.
then you, and yeah, and you've, it's a situation where you can have something very simple, like your favorite ice cream store is 5 minutes away, but it's in Connecticut. Some of the challenges also for some individuals is they can't sit for 45 minutes in a van and have that be a relaxing situation. That may be a very challenging situation. So going places that are close by, that are across the state line may be what's really the feasible alternative. So that's a very key advocacy challenge right now that we're working on, and some of you may be working on that as well.
So we'll stop for a moment here to see if there's any questions. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat button or the question button to ask questions. Okay, so I don't see any questions, but again, feel free to use those buttons to ask any questions. And we do have another portion of the presentation that's all about the advocacy programs that are available. And Rosemary is again going to present this section of the program.
Okay, thank you. We just thought it would be helpful, in addition to knowing about the Ombudsperson Program, to be aware of some of the other programs that may be of assistance that are in the Division of Advocacy. And so I'm going to go through this. That one we can skip because we've already done that. This is the vision of the State Justice Center, that people with special needs shall be protected from abuse, neglect, and mistreatment. And this will be accomplished by assuring that the state maintains the nation's highest standard of health, safety, and dignity, and by supporting the dedicated men and women who provide services. The mission is that the Justice Center is committed to supporting and protecting the health, safety, and dignity of all people with special needs and disabilities through advocacy. It says of, I think it should be for, but keep in mind, when things in state government are signed off on, sometimes they stay that way no matter what. But I think the emphasis here is respecting people's civil rights, prevention of mistreatment, and investigation of all allegations of abuse and neglect so that appropriate actions are taken. I wanted to emphasize that because I think there's some maybe misunderstanding that the Justice Center is only about investigations and special prosecutions. And while that is certainly a very important role of our agency, advocacy on behalf of people with disabilities is also a core responsibility. And the advocacy services that we have in the Justice Center are a continuation of those that were in statute with the State Office of Advocate for Persons with Disabilities. Those of you who are on the line who are a dinosaur like I am may remember the work that we did. I actually came from the Advocate's Office. And then when we merged in with the Commission on Quality of Care to become Commission on Quality of Care and Advocacy, those responsibilities carried through. So now that we're the Justice Center, those advocacy programs and services are still a core function and part of the state's commitment to improving the quality of life for all New Yorkers with disabilities. In advocacy, what's a bit different with our focus in the Justice Center than other parts of our agency are that advocacy serves individuals with all types of disabilities, all ages and all environments. And so that can include education, employment, healthcare, community living, recreation, anything and everything.
So someone in the OMH system could get advocacy.
Absolutely. That it's not just focused on people with developmental disabilities or even those that over which our agency has oversight, Office of Mental Health, Alcohol and Substance Abuse, some programs in the Health Department, some programs in the Education Department, and some in the Office for Children and Family Services. I want to emphasize that something that Carrie mentioned is when in doubt, we encourage people, please call us or email us, and we will help you get to the right place. If we're not it, we'll help you get there. And that can include, obviously, people with disabilities, but guardians, parents, family members, employers, educators, policymakers, the general population, the media. We encourage people to contact. And how we view advocacy, it's as an active process with the goal of making any social system, whether it's public, community-based, or private, more responsive to the needs of individuals that are served by that system. It's not a singular approach, but a whole continuation or continuum of strategies. I think very similar to what those of you in independent living would regard differences. We're in government, you're in the community. And what's different about us in advocacy, we can't require anybody to do anything. We can't make them engage in a particular activity or take a specific action. Other parts of our agency have much more authority. Our only power is that of persuasion, collaboration, and serving as a catalyst for change. And advocacy, I think I mentioned before, is within the Office of Program and Policy. And we're engaged in short-term case advocacy, systems advocacy, and interagency collaboration. So the short-term case advocacy, somebody may come to our attention through the information referral line, through one of you, through a neighbor. I mean, just like independent living, the people come in from all different areas, and we're not going to case manage, but we may engage in the short-term case advocacy to help somebody get to the resources that they need and to have their rights protected in getting to those services. Systems advocacy, we're engaged in working on a number of different fronts to address policies and procedures that may not enhance opportunities for people with disabilities. Some of that's on the state level, some of it's local, some of it's federal. And then interagency collaborations. Those are obvious through some of the work we do with sister state agencies like the state oversight, like those agencies over which we have oversight that we mentioned before. The other parts of our agency have oversight over them. We affectionately call them the O agencies. So persons with developmental disabilities, mental health, alcohol and substance. But we're engaged in collaborations with a multitude of agencies. We've done work with transportation, with the Department of State, ag and markets, environmental conservation. So it's a very broad-based approach to engaging in collaboration. Some of the programs and services in addition to the Ombuds program include surrogate decision-making, information and referral, technology-related assistance for individuals with disabilities or trade, adult home advocacy, and then the Interagency Coordinating Council, which I mentioned before, has not been very active. We're hopeful to get that more active. Specifically, the surrogate decision-making program is an alternative approach to the court system for obtaining an informed decision about non-emergency major medical treatment or end-of-life care for individuals who lack capacity or do not have a family member or guardian that's legally authorized or willing to make that decision. The end-of-life care decisions only applies to individuals with developmental or intellectual disabilities. Other portions of the program apply to individuals who reside or once resided in facilities or programs that are licensed, certified, operated, or funded by OPWDD, OMH, or OASIS. And the program utilizes a network of trained volunteers as committee members to render decisions. The committee members need to be from specific walks of life. There needs to be a legal representative who's an attorney, a medical representative, family member, or consumer, and service provider. And there's extensive training that's available from our surrogate decision-making folks if you have more interest in learning about that. The other thing I think it's important to know about SDMC is that consumers with disabilities can contact the program as well. We have a tendency to focus more on service providers and family members, but individuals with disabilities can contact as well and say they're concerned about a medical procedure. They understand that it's being submitted to an SDMC for consideration. They want to know more about that. And we would encourage you, if you've got constituents that you're working with that have those kind of inquiries, to contact surrogate decision making so they can learn too about what it's about. Because we focused on OPWDD, I think we're just going to go right by this slide, or OPWDD, I'm sorry, the Ombuds. And sorry for this, it's a little goofy because of the transitioning the slides to a new format. With the Interagency Council, it promotes a statewide program for coordinated services to persons who are deaf, blind, or hard of hearing in cooperation with appropriate state agencies. Serve as a clearinghouse for information on services that are available or how such services can be accessed. Disseminating information on deafness and the unique communication needs of people who are deaf, blind, or hard of hearing, and receiving and referring complaints to appropriate regulatory agencies. The Adult Home Advocacy Program, some of you may not be as familiar with. This is a state program, not federal. And it provides legal and non-legal advocacy services and training on residents' rights and self-advocacy to individuals with mental health disabilities that are living in adult homes in New York City and Long Island. And it was created and has been in existence since 1995. The services are provided by qualified not-for-profit agencies, and they're awarded through an RFP process. This is the only program we have that provides legal advocacy to the constituencies that were mentioned before. So this is a very unique situation where qualified individuals for the program can receive legal services, legal representation through the Adult Home Advocacy Program.
What kind of legal?
Well, if they're not getting access to the services that they should have.
So the advocacy program would actually help the person bring suit?
Yep. And that is through a qualified not-for-profit that went through an RFP process, and we have a firewall up. We do not get in the middle of that. We don't tell them what they can do, what they can't do with regards to the issues that they may take on.
So would it be like fair housing?
Could be, but it's got to be specifically for the adult home population. And if you would want more information about that, we can ask Karen Malcolm to get that for you. Information and referral, I think a lot of you have probably contacted us in the past. Our information and referral line can handle any kind of inquiry from individuals with disabilities or individuals concerned about disability issues. We'll provide the information, referral, but also some technical assistance, which is a little bit different. Some information and referral lines, it's just, okay, here's the program, here's the number. And our staff will help people walk through what the issue is, because sometimes, and I think those of you from independent living really know this, by the time people get to you, sometimes they are just so frustrated and they've just been contacting lots and lots of folks and have gotten nowhere. And part of the difficulty may be prioritizing what the issue is. Part of it may be that they're confused about what their rights actually are on the state level or the federal level. And so we can help sort that through with them. So I would encourage you to feel free to contact us either on the line or through the email. Now, this is what I have learned over the years is affectionately known as a warm line. This is not a hotline, so it's not staffed 24/7 like the VPCR, Vulnerable Persons Hotline, that Carrie mentioned before. So folks are here Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30, and then messages can be left any other time on the voice line there, and certainly through the email. And just, I think that's what I just said before. We can skip that one. Types of things that we get, you know, it's soup to nuts: disability rights, legal assistance, housing, employment, disability and other social service, prescription drug coverage. It's still a big issue for a lot of people. They've got some information on programs that can assist sometimes in providing low cost, or even in some circumstances, no cost, if people are eligible for their particular program. Assistive technology, the property tax reductions related to accessibility, healthcare, and disability issues for people that are in jail or prison, and that can be coming directly from a constituent or frequently from a family member or friend.
Do you work with New York Connects at all?
Mm-hmm.
Because it has a similar.
Yep.
Cool.
The trade or assistive technology program we were talking about before, it's federally funded through the U.S. Department of Education's Rehabilitation Services Administration. Actually, that changed. We've got to switch that because it's transitioned from the Rehab Services Administration. It's now under Health and Human Services under the Office for Community Living. And so don't tell them that we still have RSA up here, because it's officially transitioning very soon. And the focus is in areas of education, employment, community living, and information technology and communications. There's 12 regional trade centers. I understand that Karen Thayer has done great presentations for you. She's one of the regional trade centers, and we truly love Karen. And then again, a collaborative focus with the Department of Health, specifically early intervention, and their Money Follows the Person program. This may be newer. Those of you who've worked with us for a while may remember the trade-in program, which was like a want-ad digest. The newer analogy is a Craigslist, where people who have assistive technology that they're looking to donate or sell can connect with those who need it. We tied in with a regional initiative so that folks who are looking for assistive devices not only have access to what's in New York, but with the other 6 states that are in the Northeast.
Do they help with transportation? Because that's always the issue.
Well, there are vehicles that are in the database.
Oh, no, I meant, do they help the hospital get from person A to person B?
That's where you've got to check with the specific situation, because sometimes they do, like our regional trade center, I can't remember where, actually has a vehicle that can help move transportation from point A to point B. So if you're looking for that, I would contact that website. And also, if you need more details, Lisa Rosano, I've got names that are, I think, on the next slide. Hey, how about that? So for contacting us, we'd encourage you to go to our website. One of the things we've recently realized, that if you don't have the latest version of Explorer, you may not access everything that's on our website. So you may need to go through Google Chrome. And I am not a technical person, so you should be impressed that I'm even saying this to you. Somebody like Suzanne would be much more knowledgeable. But we are trying to work through that issue. So if you go on our website and are looking for something and say it's not appearing there, please contact me, and we'll see what we can do to get you the appropriate access. This is a slide I put in here that's, I think, just a good thing for you to know about. It is not part of our advocacy program. The Individual and Support unit is out of our Office of General Counsel. But I wanted you to be aware because they guide individuals and families through reporting, investigation, final determination, and our criminal process. And they can make referrals, serve as a liaison between the Justice Center and the state oversight agencies and providers. They promote responsive and efficient communication in an effort to address individual and family concerns. They maintain open communication with the state oversight agency contacts to facilitate a response to individual and family inquiries. They do outreach to parents, crime victim, law enforcement, self-advocacy groups, and they track data and information on calls and services received. They received a grant from the Office of Victim Services to specifically provide this kind of support to individuals with disabilities and families and guardians if those individuals are involved in making a complaint, which moves forward with a formal investigation, and in some circumstances, maybe even criminal prosecution. And that can be a pretty odious process. And so this unit within our agency out of Office of General Counsel can provide that kind of support. And that's it with what we have to say. We'd be glad to answer any inquiries. We've talked with Suzanne about if there's other presentations from our agency that would be useful to you. We can work with Suzanne to get the right folks here to present the information to you. And thanks very much for giving us time today.
So if you have a question, again, feel free to type it into the questions box. Or again, if you want to ask the question out loud, simply type into the questions box or the chat box that you want to ask a question out loud, and I can unmute you. Well, while we're waiting to see if anybody asks any questions, I'll just say thank you very much. That was very informative. And I have a question, and it's somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but how do you cover the whole state with so few people? And it's a legitimate question.
It is a legitimate question. And I think the answer is we do the best we can. Mm-hmm. Through the regional trade centers. Mm-hmm. They're a great partner mm-hmm. with us and have helped sometimes in some other kind of advocacy venues mm-hmm. that they may be able to handle. Mm-hmm. Our ombuds people have, their specific focus, obviously, right. But there are times where they're able to help engage in some of the other advocacy mm-hmm. work. The adult home advocacy partners downstate mm-hmm. Have been able to help sometimes. And we work collaboratively with mental hygiene legal services. Mm-hmm. And they've been a great partner in a number mm-hmm. of different situations. And folks like the independent living centers and other community programs. Mm-hmm. That there may be a situation that we become aware of, we can carry it to right. X point, and then we do a handoff to a community partner. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it goes the other way, mm-hmm. and they hand off to us. Mm-hmm. But it's a very legitimate question.
As I said, kind of tongue-in-cheek, because, it just seems like a very small number of people given the scope of what you're doing.
It is. Could you write to our executive director and executive
and ask that question? All right, so I don't see any questions. So with that, we'll conclude this webinar. Thank you, everyone, for attending. And this webinar will be posted on the website, on the NYAIL website, as well as the PowerPoints will be available there as well. Thank you very much for attending. right, now I have to stop